Hey, welcome to the Go-To Physio podcast. My name is Dave O'Sullivan, and in season 4, it's all about building a go-to clinic that gives you happy patients, happy staff, high profits, and the freedom as a proud go-to clinic owner. My aim is to share my mistakes and my successes over the last 15 years working in professional sport and private practice, and ultimately building a go-to clinic that's given me the freedom to travel all around the world. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Go-To Physio podcast. My name is Dave O'Sullivan. Now, season 4 is all about building a go-to clinic that delivers happy patients, happy staff, high profits, and freedom for you as a go-to clinic owner. Now, this episode is all about the 6 head physio milestones that will help you solve the most complex cases in your practice to consistently generate reviews and referrals. Now, this is a special episode. I'm on my own today. And first of all, I was recording this lesson for the members in the Go-To Clinic Mastermind as part of our head physio systems curriculum. But I felt it's such an important topic that I wanted to make it available for everybody. So this episode is going to be an anchor episode. It's going to be an episode that you're going to want to come back to time and time again. And in the coming episodes of the Go-To Physio podcast, we're going to be talking a lot about your head physio systems, because the head physio systems is the missing cog in 99% of clinics that stops clinic owners from achieving true freedom. Because the head physio systems is the thing that's going to protect the reputation in the clinic. It's going to make sure that you can leave for months at a time if you want to. The reputation of the clinic is intact because you're delivering results for patients. And as you grow your clinic, you're going to transition from very often a solo clinic owner where you're a very good clinician, and now you need to be a very good clinic owner. And as part of that, the head physio systems, in my opinion, is probably the most important role that you can do, or that you can get someone else to eventually do for you. Because the head physio systems is ultimately and directly responsible for the profit engine of your clinic. Because a go-to clinic, it's not built on how many new patients you get. It's built on how many of those patients you can get to keep progressing, especially when the pain eases, and deliver results that exceed expectations, that consistently generate reviews and then referrals. Reviews make it easier for your marketing to position you stronger, and then referrals obviously are going to increase your patient numbers also. But the most important thing of all of a head physio systems to understand is that the head physio systems is the real profit engine. When you look at your financials, and we've talked a lot about this in previous episodes, the importance of having a profit and loss, a functional P&L that actually gives you the right information, allows you to make better decisions. And when you break your P&L down into a more user-friendly one, what we do is we look at the initial assessment income, and then we look at the follow-up income. Okay, and when you break your P&L down like that, you can see that the initial assessment income, it's a small fraction of your income. It's the follow-up income that is the thing that's going to generate the revenue and the profits of the business. And you've already done all the hard work getting that patient through the door. It's much, much easier to keep a patient progressing than it is to find another patient. And that's where the head physio systems are so important. Now, this framework that I'm going to cover in this episode is something that I've had to come up with for my own clinic initially. And then as I was starting to coach more and more clinic owners, I saw that they were running into troubles with their own staff members, where they were getting frustrated because therapists were getting a patient, or they were getting a diary full of patients. After a couple of sessions, the patients were dropping off, or they didn't have a patient visit average similar to the clinic owner. Now, that makes it very, very difficult to scale and grow your practice if you're constantly having to look for those new patients. So this framework is something that I designed as part of our head physio systems to be able to identify quickly and efficiently for the head physio where the problem is with the clinician. And remember, in the past episodes, we talked a lot about using your numbers to empower your team. If you want to attract and retain top talent, you have to use these numbers in order to empower and facilitate and help your team be successful. These numbers and this framework I'm going to take you through, it's not designed to look at your therapist and blame your therapist and go, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough. It's used to empower your therapist to help them get results, because very often your therapists are not interested in the revenue and the profit of the clinic, they're interested in helping patients. So the 6 head physio milestones that I want to take you through now have been extremely powerful for me as a clinician. They've been extremely powerful for my mentorship therapists, and they're going to be extremely powerful for you if you implement these. So I'm going to share my screen if you're watching this presentation, or if you're listening to it, then obviously I will talk you through it. And the key thing to understand with this is that the language of high performers is numbers. Okay, Todd Herman, I first came across that by a guy called Todd Herman. Okay, now we can modify that and we can say that actually the language of a go-to therapist is numbers. So remember my definition of a go-to therapist. A go-to therapist is somebody in private practice that can take a patient in the initial assessment, they can make sense of the symptoms, they can confidently explain the problem solution plan and a realistic expectation of how many sessions it can take. They can then start fast with the patient so they can feel the difference, and they can keep that patient progressing even when the pain eases, so that they can deliver the definition of success for that patient. Now, I'm going to break that down into more bite-sized manageable chunks for you in this episode so that you can see exactly where your therapist may be lacking certain skills, knowledge, or know-how. Okay, so the language of go-to therapists is numbers. So for me, a go-to therapist that can discharge 90% of their patients into Raven fans. Okay, so again, you can check your Raven fan status using a net promoter score, which again we will go into in a different episode. But having that objective, that gold standard, gives you something for your subconscious mind, your therapist's subconscious mind, in order to achieve, so that we can work towards. Okay. Now, as always, we use the framework that we teach in the mentorship in order to design treatment plans, in order to design rehab exercises, etc. Is if we want to optimize for the outcome, what are the skills that the therapist needs? Once we understand the skills, what are the actions they need to develop those skills? And we can reverse engineer then to empower our therapists. So in order to ultimately achieve a 90% discharge rate with a world-class NPS score, it all comes down to the actions and the inputs that the therapists are doing on a daily basis. That's going to deliver the outputs essentially. Now, you may track some of these numbers in your clinic, such as your discharge completion, your did not attend, your cancel, did not rebook rates, your net promoter score, the number of 5-star reviews, referrals, all of those things. All of those things are lagging indicators. So these are things that are going to measure what has happened as a consequence of the actions. Okay, so what we want to focus on first and foremost is some of the leading indicators. So the key milestones that we really need to achieve these outputs, we're going to talk through as we progress. So the key question becomes, what are the actions needed to achieve the output? Now, knowledge is having the right answers. Intelligence is asking the right questions. Okay, so we have to ask ourselves the right questions in order to do this. So when we look at our customer journey, a new patient books an appointment, a new patient turns up, new patient rebooks, new patient is discharged successfully. Patient then delivers a net promoter score, ideally greater than 8 out of 10, on how likely are they to recommend their friends and family to us. They leave a 5-star review and then they come back again in the future. That's the ideal customer journey for every physio clinic. The reality is there are some patients where the patient will book the appointment, they'll never attend. Okay, so that isn't necessarily a head physio problem. That's more of an onboarding problem, okay, or even potentially a marketing problem. The patient rebooks after the first session, but they cancel and they don't attend the second session. Okay, then you might have patients who do attend the second session, but they drop off before actually being successfully discharged. They self-discharge, or they just cancel you never hear from them again. Then you also have a subset of patients who completed a full treatment plan, but they were never wowed, and they're at risk of going to the competition in the future. Okay, so these are the people who have been discharged. They never leave you a 5-star review. They never refer anyone to your clinic again. Okay, that's a shame. Okay, because you've done all of the hard work there, but something didn't happen along the 6 milestones in order to achieve that. So they're the things in the leaky buckets essentially that are costing a lot of clinics a lot of profit revenue. Okay, and a lot of stress looking constantly for new patients. So we want to clean up all of those leaks in the bucket so that we ultimately have as many Raven fans that actively refer friends and family and is a customer for life essentially. And there is a framework that we can use in order to give us the best possible chance to get as many of these new patients to go through that customer journey And why is this important? Well, a really important question to ask yourself, and this has kept me up at night a few times. What would your business or reputation look like now if you kept every single patient who walked through the door? Okay, so every single patient who came through your door at some point, they were a customer for life. Now, you mightn't see them for a year or two, but they consistently come back to you time and time again. If they have injuries or if any of their family or friends are struggling with pain, they tell them about you. You're top of mind for them. Okay, they wouldn't go anywhere else. What would your business look like now? Okay, and that really highlights the importance of getting this right and the 6 milestones. Now, the first thing we need to really understand is what is value to a patient. Before we even worry about the milestones, we need our therapist to understand what is value, because perceived value is the expectations that the customer has or the patient has from your solution. And actual value is only ever created when the expectations are matched. So it doesn't really matter what your opinion or your therapist's opinion of value is. All that matters is what the patient's perceived value is. What is the patient expecting from this experience with you? Because we can only ever deliver value when the expectations are matched. So then the question becomes, how can we exceed those expectations? And that's where Raven fans and referrals and reviews are only ever created when the solution exceeds the expectations. And this is very, very important what I just said, because I've just shown you now in a very high level strategy how you can consistently get Raven fans, referrals, and reviews. It's very, very simple. Step one, identify how your patient perceives value. Okay, what is their expectations from your solution? Step two, make sure that you deliver and match those expectations as a minimum. And then step three, exceed those expectations. Step one, identify how they perceive value. Step two, match them. Step three, exceed them. Okay. If you exceed expectations of patients, that is the thing that's going to give you Raven fans. Okay. So Raven fans, it's a bit of a buzzword and it's a bit of a vague word. Okay. But what I've done there for you now is I've broken that down. Step one, understand how your patient perceives value. Step two, match the value. Step three, exceed the value. Okay. And this is how essentially we're going to do that. So, what does that look like in the clinic? Step one, know the expectations of your patient. That is found in the subjective assessment by asking high quality questions. Step two, know the value or outcomes that the patient wants along the way. Okay. So, the big overarching definition of success for the patient, that's when the patient's going to be successfully discharged. But we need to understand what other outcomes and milestones along the way on that journey the patient wants and needs to be able to do. That again is going to be found in the subjective assessment. Then we need to set expectations for the patient, okay? Because again, if the patient expectations is not realistic, then we're never going to be able to match them. And that's why in the first session, setting expectations in private practice, it's non-negotiable. Okay. You want to Raven fans, reviews, and referrals, you have to be able to set expectations. We also need to be able to then analyze how to actually give the value. So we need to be able to identify the gap from where the patient is currently to where they want to get to. And that is your assessment. So you can see here, in order to exceed expectations for a patient in private practice, that's going to consistently generate reviews and referrals. 4 out of the 5 key components all happen in the subjective objective assessment and the effective explanation before even one bit of treatment is initiated. Okay, and this is where most people go wrong. Okay, then step 5, we have to find out the issues and we need to fix it. We actually need to deliver a treatment plan that fills that gap from where they are to where they want to get to where they're expecting to get to. Okay, so step 1, know the expectations of the patient. We're going to get that through asking through high quality questions in the subjective. Step 2, know the other values and the outcomes that the patient wants to achieve along the way, that they can see undeniably that they are receiving value. Okay, and that's really important to understand. We need undeniable proof that the patient is making progress and they are receiving value. We need to set expectations with the patient, which is going to happen in the effective explanation. Okay, so that's again, or if that's what we call it in the Go-To Therapist mentorship clinical system, effective explanation, that the patient understands the explanation that you need, the information that you need to give them in order to be able to understand the problem, solution plan, and realistically how many sessions it's going to take. You're going to analyze how to give the value. Okay, so again, you're going to use that assessment findings in your objective assessment. We're going to tweak our objective assessment so that's specific to the value of the patient, and then we're going to deliver it. Okay, we're going to actually then execute our treatment plan. So 4 out of 5 of these, 80% of this, it's all subjective, objective, effective explanation in private practice. The hands-on treatment, the rehab techniques are actually quite easy once you're clear on what you need to do. From my experience, the majority of therapists aren't clear, which is why they go to they're safe, they're comfortable hands-on techniques in rehab, and everybody gets the same hands-on, everybody gets the same rehab. Okay, so the big problem, we've been conditioned as therapists to focus on pain, muscles, pathology. We think in terms of pain, muscle, and pathology. Our patients think and speak in terms of value or outcomes. They are not thinking muscles, pathology, pain. They're thinking, I can't do this, I can't do that. Okay, they're thinking other thoughts around their lifestyle. So this mismatch is absolutely detrimental to clinics' profit. The customer rarely buys what the business thinks it sells, that Peter Drucker. Okay, the patient rarely buys what the therapist thinks it's selling them with the treatment plan. And that's where we have to align that. We have to get the therapist to design a treatment plan that aligns with what the patient is really buying. Okay. And in order to understand what the patient is really buying, that all happens in a subjective assessment. Okay. So we must condition ourselves to think and speak in terms of patient outcomes. Now, that's incredibly important for us as head physios, because then it makes our lives so much easier. Is the therapist aligned with the outcomes of the patient? Because if they're not aligned with the outcomes of the patient, then they haven't a chance of matching the expectations, or if they do, they're going to get very lucky. But most therapists may match it at best, but they're not going to exceed expectations, which is why they're not getting consistent reviews and referrals. So small hinges swing big doors. Okay. And this is the key thing with the head physio frameworks, is the small actions that you do with your therapists as you transition from a solo clinic owner to a head physio. It's going to swing big doors, not only in terms of patient outcomes, but also in terms of your profit, your happy patients, your happy staff, because your staff are delivering great results. So they're going to be happy, high profits, and then that's going to give you freedom essentially, because all the patients aren't going to see you. Okay. Now we need to understand that there's different skills and actions through the journey with your patient in order to continue to exceed expectations and deliver outcomes. So the key thing is, what are the non-negotiable inputs we need to do every single day in order to achieve this discharge completion in 90%, or did not rebooks or cancels or drop offs, whatever you want to call it, are less than 10%. Okay, you could even go a little bit lower. Net promoter score is greater than 70 to 80%. 5-star reviews and referrals. So the 6 stages that your patient needs to go through. So the 6 stages is something that you as a head physio are going to want to use time and time again. So anytime you have a therapist that's not achieving some of these gold standard numbers, we're going to use these 6 stages to identify at what stage is the problem actually happening. And why that's going to be powerful then is you can go to that appropriate stage and we can focus on the small actions that are going to then achieve, or the small inputs or actions, whatever you want to call them, are going to achieve that actual output. Okay, this is where this is incredibly powerful as a head physio. Okay, and again, as I said, first and foremost, I'm recording this podcast for my Go-To Clinic Mastermind members, where as they move through our Go-To Clinic business mentorship as a solo clinic owner, and then you move into the mastermind program, you have different problems, because now you have to go from being a really good clinician to a really good head physio. And these 6 stages are going to help you do that essentially. Okay, so what are the 6 stages? Now, before we get into that, it's really important that we need undeniable proof that the patient has progressed through each stage for complete clarity. And that's really important for you as a head physio as well, is that you need undeniable proof from your therapist that the patient has progressed through. And having undeniable proof and helping your therapists to be accountable to the patient and show undeniable proof, that helps them focus a lot more. You won't believe the amount of clarity they'll get when they have to prove undeniably that the patient has progressed to the next stage. So stage 1 is the patient needs to buy into the treatment plan. And this is the stage that probably 90% of your problems are going to occur. Because if the patient doesn't buy into the treatment plan, it's going to be very, very hard with the rest of the stages. So now we say, okay, well, what are the key actions that need to happen in order for that output to take care of itself? The patient needs to feel listened to and understood, especially complex patients. They just want to feel listened to first and foremost. They need to feel a proper examination has taken place. They need to understand the explanation. In order to understand the explanation, the therapist needs to be able to make sense of the symptoms and have confidence and clarity. So at this point now, even before we get to the patient understanding the explanation, does the therapist understand the actual problem, solution, and plan? So is it a knowledge problem? Okay, do they have a knowledge problem or do they have a communication problem, the therapist? So straight away at this point, we can see the gaps that we need to fill, because a lot of therapists will actually have the knowledge, but they just need a communication framework. Okay. The patient needs to believe the plan, it needs to be realistic, and that the therapist can actually help them. So at this point now, the patient needs to feel that that plan is aligned to their value, how they define value, and they need to believe and have certainty that the therapist can help. And the majority of patients, what they're looking for, especially complex cases, they're looking for certainty. They need to believe that you've got certainty that you can help this patient. Okay. Now, again, even at this point, if your therapist do not have the knowledge, the skills to do this, to take a patient in, ask the right questions, make sense of the symptoms, and then have a framework to confidently explain the problem, solution, and plan to the patient, then beyond this point, it's going to get very, very hard. You're going to notice the drop-offs, the cancellations happen at sessions 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so this is absolutely critical. So even before we go on to the next few stages, hand on heart, can your therapist confidently make sense of symptoms, confidently explain the problem, solution, how many sessions it's going to take a patient? Because the patient is going to trust the therapist with a plan far more than a therapist that just wings it session to session with no plan. Okay, it's the definition of insanity. Imagine getting into a car, okay, in London, and you want to get up to Edinburgh in Scotland, okay, for all our Northern Hemisphere people. You get into the car, there's no sat nav, there's no clocks, there's no announcement, okay, of how long it's going to take. Or you could use the same analogy for a plane. You get into a plane, and I'm going to Australia, okay, and I've got absolutely no idea how long it's going to take because there's no clocks. I've no idea how long I've been in the plane, okay, or how much more I have to get to Australia. It's the definition of insanity. If I get in that plane, the first thing I see is I see the map on the screen. What does it say? Here's where we are. Here's the hours to the destination. Okay. And then every hour that goes past, or every 2 hours, every movie you watch, whatever it is, okay, you feel like you're making progress. You're getting closer. And that satisfies the mind. And that's the exact thing that has to happen in a private practice treatment plan. Every single session, your patient comes in, they looks at that clock on that or the map on the plane, and they can see we've made progress. Okay. It's absolutely critical. It's a human need to understand that, to feel certain, to feel safe that we're actually on the right track. Okay. So the patient needs to believe the plan and that the therapist can actually help them. Okay. So before you skip ahead, I would really, really encourage you to ask yourself the honest question: is it a skills problem? Is it a communication problem with the therapist at this point? Because if the patient doesn't buy into the treatment plan, you're going to see a lot of these downstreams. Okay, so this is where we use a V in the therapist mentorship in our clinical system, but we're also going to leverage this V in our go-to clinic business systems, and especially our head physio systems, because this is very powerful because it gives me a snapshot of the actual patient's definition of values. So within a second, as a head physio, I can see our V, where on the left hand side, it's all our previous injuries. On the right hand side, it's the milestones of the outcomes that the patient wants. Now, we've had a situation in the past where I looked at a V for a therapist, and they had on the V, the patient wants to do wall taps, they want to do anterior loading of the shoulder, and they want to do, I think it was a shoulder plyometric exercise, okay? And I said quite frankly to the first, there's no patient wakes up in the morning and they say, oh, I wish I could do wall taps. Okay. The wall taps were an exercise that was getting the patient to achieve an outcome. But on the treatment plan, it was all about the exercise. It did not define the value for the patient. Whereas when you look at the high level treatment plan for your patients, you need to see things like, first step, I want to be able to lift my hand overhead pain free. I want to be able to wash my hair. I want to be able to change gears in the car pain free. I want to be able to go to the gym, and I want to be able to bench press. I want to be able to shoulder press. So All of the things that the patient values should be clearly seen on the treatment plan. And if you're not seeing that on the treatment plan, that's going to give me a very big clue that the therapist doesn't understand how the patient defines value. So hopefully you can start to see how this is so powerful, not only for a clinician in order to help a patient get buy-in, but also for you now as a head physio. So you get an instant snapshot into your therapist's understanding of how the patient has defined value. Now, stage two is the patient notices progress in the first session. Now, I could do a whole session, I could do a whole week long course on stage one, stage two, stage three. Okay, but obviously for time here, we're going to go through them at a pretty high level. Okay, but stage two, the patient notices progress in the first session. Because very often what can happen is you can see the snapshot. So when we go back to the snapshot, yeah, that all looks good. Okay. And then when we look at the treatment that was initiated, okay, then this is usually where it's a stage two problem. Okay, so you can get all of this right in terms of mapping out the treatment plan. It looks exactly like the patient wants in terms of value. It's very logical. You've predicted how many sessions, but then if you don't execute the right treatment, this is where things go wrong. Okay, so in stage two, the patient has to notice progress in the first session because they're going to be excited about the treatment plan, but at the end of the day, reality is they need to feel a difference in the first session. So the patient needs to receive valuable input via either education, okay, and again, for a lot of these complex cases, they want certainty, they want a plan. So mapping out a treatment plan is actually the start of the treatment process for patients, especially complex patients. For acute patients who are just in pain, they're probably not going to value that as much. They want hands-on treatment or something like that to ease their symptoms. Okay, so we need to understand where the patient is. But for complex cases who have been around the houses, the most important thing they want to know is, why is this a problem? What do I need to do to get right? They want that plan. And again, there's a lot of top-down processing changes that happens as a result of that. We update their belief system, among many other things. Okay, so the patient receives valuable input, either education, hands-on, or rehab, and creates a processing change. Now, this day and age, if you have half a clue about anatomy, biomechanics, and pain science, it is so easy to change pain. Okay, and again, I can pull your earlobe, okay, and I can change your pain experience in your knee. Okay, I can do anything to the nervous system, okay, and I'm pretty confident I can probably create a change. Okay, and now that's a good and a bad thing. Okay, it's a bad thing because a lot of therapists go down this hole of just getting short-term changes without understanding the why behind our doing things. But it's also useful because it means that if we know where to focus on, we can create these processing changes that can change the patient's pain experience. And we have to be able to do something like that, I think, in the first session with a lot of these complex cases. Now, the education and the plan will very often make a patient actually relax, which may decrease their pain experience anyways. Okay, so this is the value of mapping the treatment plan. But in terms of your hands-on and your rehab, we have a thing in the mentorship, in the therapist mentorship clinical system, that's called a fast start. Okay, so if a patient comes in with knee pain, we need to make a fast start. So there's going to be 2 or 3 key peripheral tissues that I'm going to want to treat in order to change either knee flexion, extension, pain, doing a single leg squat, whatever it is. Okay, because if we understand anatomy, biomechanics, and pain science, then we can clinically reason very quickly what are the tissues that are going to be influencing that tissue. Okay, and we can even create a process to change, even if there's pathology present. Okay, now if there's pathology present, that's obviously we need to set expectations with that as well. Okay, in terms of and that needs to be on the treatment plan for the patient. But the need to feel progress in the first session is my key point. So the execution of the hands-on treatment and the rehab is going to give you a clue here if this was the problem. Okay, and you can start to see now, okay, step one, we understand the value, but step two, was the treatment plan optimized to deliver that value? Okay, and if it wasn't, then the patient's probably not going to notice progress in the first session. Okay, so if we've done our job in stage one and stage two, the new patient is going to rebook. Okay, great. Now, stage three is the patient has rebooked but actually turned up to the second session. So if you've done a good job, you've gone to buy into the treatment plan, you've made some progress, but then all of a sudden the patient doesn't turn up to the second session, and assuming that they bought into the treatment plan and they felt progress in the first session, then something has happened between the time you've discharged them to the time that they were supposedly going to turn up for the second session. So what are the key inputs for that? So the patient's bought into the therapist and the treatment plan, they've felt some change in everyday life, okay, but they need to continue to feel that progress. And that's where we have to design rehab exercises that fits into the patient's everyday life, where they can feel the difference in everyday life. If you're relying on motivation alone for patients to do an exercise, you're going to struggle. Okay, they will do it initially out of loyalty to you as a therapist. That's what the literature says. But after a little bit of time, they're only going to do the exercises that they can feel a difference working, that are giving them the most benefit, and that are easy to do in daily life. So very often what happens then is we've done our hands-on, but we haven't prescribed exercises that are easy to do and practice throughout the day, and creates further processing changes in everyday life for the patient. So the treatment plan and the rehab exercises were not optimized for the patient, because then what happens is that short-term change that we've got with our hands-on or whatever it is has declined. Obviously, pain will come back again. Okay, it's easy to change pain. It's very, very hard to keep that pain away. Okay, unless we're on the root cause. Okay, so chances are now your rehab exercises hasn't reinforced your hands-on treatment. And that's really, really important to understand. Okay, is it's not just about doing some hands-on in stage 2. It's then taking that and prescribing the right exercises that's going to continue to get that progress. And that's where we need to be able to clinically reason, understand the why behind everything we're doing. So if the patient was pretty good in the first session, we've identified the value, the treatment plan looked pretty good, then very often what's going to be happening is the rehab exercises prescribed to keep the gains from session 1 to session 2 were probably not optimal. And then the patient doesn't feel the change in everyday life, and their confidence levels then starts to diminish. They're not confident to getting value from the next session. Okay, this is usually, from my experience, what happens. Okay, so that's a stage 2 or stage 3. So again, if this is the problem, and we're happy with stage 1 and stage 2, then that makes it very easy for me to then go and coach my therapists in terms of rehab prescription, as opposed to a hands-on treatment issue, or a answering the 4 pro sport questions of what's the problem, why did it happen, what's the plan, how many sessions it's going to take. Okay, so stage 4, the patient now has returned for the second session. Now the next key milestone is the patient needs to hit their first 3 milestones or outcomes, okay, at home or in the real world, within the first 3-4 sessions. So you can see now how we can really leverage these outcomes, and we can stay focused and accountable to our patient. And a lot of therapists won't like using these outcomes because it's going to hold you accountable to your patient now. Our egos have to park at the door, and we have to hold ourselves accountable and say, and the nice thing about outcomes is it's a yes or no answer. Are you now able to lift your hand completely pain-free overhead? Are you able to wash your hair pain-free? Are you able to move the gear stick in the car pain-free now? Yes or no? Okay, and the nice thing about that is the patient ticks the outcome off. Yes, I can do that now. We can move on to the next thing. Okay, so we have to hit the first 3-4 milestones. They've been ticked off and completed. You need permission from the patient to tick those off. Can you now do this? Okay, yes or no? The pain is easing and they're feeling the difference between sessions. Okay, now if they're not doing all of those things, and they're not hitting the first 3 or 4 milestones within the first 3 to 4 sessions, or even at least 1 or 2 of these, they are the highest risk patients of dropping off and cancelling, because they're not feeling progress. And this is the power of this, is most patients, systems and head physio systems and business coaching programs that I've been involved in the past, it's all about the admin team having to get these patients back, the patients that cancelled and dropped off. Or admin team need to ring these patients, the therapists need to ring these patients. Well, very often with a lot of these patients, if they haven't received the value and are not confident, it doesn't matter how good your sales script is and all of this crap. Okay, these patients aren't coming back. Okay, there is a small section of patients who cancel, did not rebook, and they've been meaning to come back again. Okay, that's fine. Okay, and you will get those back. I'm not saying that. But for patients who have lost trust in the therapist, they've lost trust that they can get value, there is no sales script in the world that is going to get that patient back. Okay, and if they do come back for another session and they continue to not get value, they're going to get pissed off. It's a high chance of a 1-star review, and they're going to be a pacifier where they're going to tell everybody to stay away from you. Okay, so solve the root problem. Now, the nice thing about the Go-To Clinic Head Physio systems, rather than being reactive with those patients, is we can identify who are the patients that aren't on track to hit their first 3 milestones. So now we have a simple way in the clinic every single week where we can go, okay, in the first 3 to 4 milestones, who is at most risk of dropping off. And these are the patients that we discuss in our in-service training every week then, because these are the patients that we have to problem solve to get back on track quickly so that they don't drop off. So now as the head physio systems and the Go-To clinic system, we're proactive. Rather than waiting for the patient to drop off and try to get them back again, we're being proactive and going, okay, these are the highest risk patients who aren't getting value. Let's work as a team and solve these problems. So hopefully you can see how that's going to make a massive difference to your happy patients, your happy staff, because now the staff feel supported, and then it's going to make a massive difference to your profits because these patients are actually staying on track. Much more efficient business because now your admin staff don't have to ring these patients who have dropped off. Okay, so we need to hit the first three milestones ideally. Now we've got a way to actually track that with our head physio systems by looking at outcomes first and foremost. You can see the power of outcomes, not only for a clinical point of view, but from a head physio point of view as well. They're absolutely incredibly powerful. Okay. Your patient feels the difference between the sessions. Again, the main problem here is that usually it's that the treatment plan isn't optimized to the outcome. You're not either addressing the root cause of the problem or there's something else going on. So that's where we need to go back to our injury history to find the root problem. But ideally, the patient has ticked off, we've undeniable proof that the patient has achieved outcome A, outcome B, outcome C. Can you now do this? Yes. Can you now do that? Yes. Can you now do that? Yes. We have achieved the first three milestones on our way to the definition of success for the patient. There's undeniable proof that there's been progress made and that there's more progress to be, further progress to be made. So now we move on to stage 5. Okay. Now that we've hit the first few milestones, stage 5 is all about the patient's pain is ease, yet feels and understands there's more progress to be made. Okay, now if we haven't mapped out the full treatment plan and if we haven't done a proper stage 1 where the patient buys into the treatment plan, this stage is going to be very, very difficult. Okay, so again, you'll get a lot of patients to stage 4, but a lot of patients, if they get discharged at stage 4, they're patients who we haven't exceeded expectations. A lot of patients who get to stage 4 are patients who have received value because their actual value has delivered what they were expecting. But to get raving fans, we need to exceed expectations. And we can only really exceed expectations when the pain is gone. Okay, because we can make the patient feel completely different. Okay, and this is where we get them back to in Louis Gifford's words, thoughtless, fearless movement, and that is true value. So stage 5 is all about the patient's pain is ease, yet feels and understands there's more progress to be made. And this is where raving fans are built. This is where Go-To clinics are built, stage 5. So at this stage now, milestones have been ticked off from previous progressions, but there are milestones still on the plan that are not yet achieved. Okay, so again, if the patient's definition of success is to run 10K, okay, then you simply ask the patient, okay, have you been able to run 10K yet? No, I haven't. Have you been able to run yet? Okay, no, I haven't. Okay, so they can clearly see there's more work to be done in terms of their milestones and their plan. So the patient is shown that there is more progress to be made, but then they're also exposed to movements in a safe manner that they can feel there is more work to be done. Okay, and I think this is something really with a lot of therapists at stage 5, they don't actually know how to do. So very often what happens if you are a clinic owner, you have a lot of therapists that have a PVA usually around 3 to 4, is you'll say to the therapist, you'll be sick of saying to the therapist, they need to keep coming back to do this and this and to be discharged. You know, it's very, very hard to get people right in 3 or 4 sessions. Very often what I find is therapists don't know where to go next. And if you solve that problem by bridging the gap from low to high level rehab at that stage, then and the therapist knows where to go next, then this stage is passed and their PVA naturally and ethically increases. So a lot of therapists that don't have the skills, the know-how to bridge the gap from low to high level rehab, they skip progressions too quickly. Okay, and again, it's a bit like the pro sport analogy here. If I've got a hamstring tear who's a grade 2, they're going to be pain free probably 10 days post injury. Okay, they'll do all my tests for me usually. Okay, they'll be depending if it's a 2B or a 2C, whether it's tendon or muscle involvement, etc. But very often, okay, around 10 days between hands-on rehab, isometrics, you can get that patient pain free on their bridges, on the resisted testing, the rage and bull, all those things. But the patient isn't going to go back flat out training, sprinting for probably realistically 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, so that's where we have to then expose them and make sure it's safe. And very often therapists don't know how to do that because they haven't been exposed to that in university or national healthcare settings, etc. So if we give the therapist the knowledge and the know-how, then very often the will is actually there in order to keep the patients progressing. So please don't dismiss this as a clinic owner and just say, oh, the therapist, blah, blah, blah. You as a clinic owner, your job is to get the best out of your staff. So are you empowering your staff and showing them how to do this? Okay. Or if you want some support and help, the Go-To Therapist clinical system will solve this for you very, very quickly. Okay. So they need to be shown and exposed to these movements so that they can feel there is more work to be done. Okay. So really, really important that we get that right. Now, in terms of the actual stage 5, we have to make sure that the patient is done these movements specific to the outcome still. Okay, so everything that we communicate and we talk to the patient about, it has to be about these outcomes still, even though we're getting high level. So everything that we're saying to the patient, everything that we're doing, it's all outcome, it's all milestone focused still. Okay, so now that they're shown and exposed to these movements, okay, they know and they can feel that there's more work to be done. Then we move them to stage 6. So now that we fill that gap and we continue to hit these milestones, okay, they achieve stage 6. And that is that they are discharged having achieved their definition of success. So we know in all uncertainty terms, we have undeniable proof in a court of law that they have achieved their definition of success. Okay. And that's incredibly important, that the patient is moving with thoughtless, fearless movement when discharged. No patient wants to be pain-free, but have to hold their breath, have to think about moving. It's exhausting, okay? Patients want to move with, as Louis Gifford said, thoughtless, fearless movement. The patient needs to be able to move with thoughtless, fearless movement. And that is true value. And that's how we're going to exceed expectations with private practice patients. They've executed their definition of success that they've told us in the very first session. This is my definition of success for working with you. They've achieved that without reactions or setbacks. We know they've done it, and we are absolutely confident and comfortable that we have achieved that. And they've also been exposed to worst case scenarios. What are the worst case scenarios that you're going to get into in daily life? Okay, for an athlete, that could be top end speed with trunk rotation or something like that. For a non-sporting patient, it may be lifting your kids out of a car seat or something like that. Okay, so what are the awkward positions that patients need to go into? And if you look at the literature, a lot of back pain patients, the pain comes back again when they've been exposed, usually to these awkward positions, or said another way, they haven't been exposed to these awkward positions in the rehab. So when they get into these awkward positions, that's usually when their backs flare up again. Okay, that's a small subsection of the data of a study I'm referring to there. Okay, there is other case contributing factors, of course, as well, besides just these awkward positions. But that is one of them that the literature has shown that can predispose back pain to return again. And it makes sense again. So we have to show the patient that it's safe to tolerate load in all of these positions again. So have you done that? And actually, when you focus on the outcomes and you look at all of that, there's actually quite a bit of work to be done. And when you look at how much work to be done, and the beauty of mapping it out in the first session is you set realistic expectations for yourself as well. Okay. You actually set expectations that the actual outcomes are there, and actually for me to get that all of these things done, it's not going to happen in 1 or 2 sessions. I'm actually going to need the time. Okay. And I think that's really, really important, is to understand that when you look at value and when you map outcomes, this stuff takes time. It takes time for a hamstring to go from pain-free on the bed to get back to top end speed. Okay. And it also takes time for these patients, but we put undue pressure on ourselves as therapists, and we think we're actually helping the patient by discharging them early. We're not. Okay. If you get a patient pain-free, but they are still holding their breath, or they're still worried about doing things, or worried about the pain coming back, that's exhausting. For every impulse that is generated in the brain for that thought of that patient's pain coming back, you've done them a disservice by not taking them for that extra session or 2. If that patient has worries about that pain coming back, there's impulses happening in their brain, which is generating these thoughts, which is creating these emotions. And that's not good for a patient. For the sake of one extra session where you can expose them to these situations, you can update their belief system and give them confidence, And then that impulse that they're generating is thinking about other things that's improving their mood, which is improving their life, okay, is absolutely massive. So anytime you discharge a patient and they're still worried about doing a particular movement, you're costing that patient a bit of happiness on some level. Okay, now I appreciate that's pretty deep, but it's true. Okay, my thoughts, my emotions, all of these things, the last thing a patient wants to do after being discharged is continue to worry about going into the gym and making it worse again. You need to show that patient that it's safe. You need to update their belief system. The only way to do that is exposing them to these situations. Okay, graded exposure, they have to go through it. They have to do the work. The work comes before the belief, and that's why you need that extra session or two. Okay, so a little bit of a rant there. I apologize. Okay, so you can see the power of mapping out those outcomes. What do they need? What do they want to be able to do? Can we actually tick all of those things off for the patient? So small actions done really well leads to life-changing transformations for the patient. It leads to life-changing confidence for therapists, high profits for a clinic owner ethically, and it'll give you freedom because you're not treating all the patients. So step one, patient has to buy into the treatment plan. They have to notice progress in the first session. They have to rebook and turn up. If they're not rebooking and turning up, what do we prescribe between the first session and the second session to keep the progress? Was the treatment plan aligned to the value that they perceive? Patient has hit the first 3 milestones at home or the real world within the first 3 to 4 sessions. All that is stage 4 is, are they making progress? And it's a way for you to be accountable and say, actually, they're off track, they're not making progress. I need to go back into my complex case rehab builder. Okay, so again, that tool that I built in the Go-To Physio hub, go back in, spend some time going through that case. Okay, that's what the complex case rehab builder is. You can pick that up for £7. Okay, go onto my website, thegotophysio.com. You'll see on the homepage the complex case rehab builder. You can pick that tool up for £7, the clinical reasoning framework. If the patient isn't progressing and they're not hitting the first 3 to 4 milestones within the first 3 to 4 sessions, you need to go back into that. Or better still, if it's your therapist, they need to go in and answer those things. And then when you go into your in-service training, you can get a glimpse of their clinical reasoning, their thought process, and you can see their gaps. Okay. Everything that I've built in the Go-To Physio Hub for Go-To clinic owners, okay, is designed to not only ethically increase your profits and your reviews, your referrals, which helps your marketing, your positioning, all of those things. But first and foremost, everything inside the Go-To Physio Hub that I've built for Go-To clinic owners inside our Go-To Clinic mentorship program, it's been built to empower your therapists. It's been built to help your therapists get results with patients, because that is what needs to happen first and foremost. Your therapists are the revenue generators in the clinic. They're the most important piece of machinery. If we were in a manufacturing industry, the machines are the most important thing in that business because they're the things that churn out the actual products. The therapists in a private practice are the most important thing. They're the equivalent of the surgeon. Everything else should be set up in your business to support and help the therapist achieve results. Okay, and that's what the Go-To Physio Hub does essentially. That's what the admin systems do in the Go-To Clinic Mastermind, is everything needs to be optimized to help the therapists get these results because they're the revenue generators. You cannot generate revenue profit in a physio clinic without the therapists. Okay, so step 4, they hit the first 3 milestones. Step 5, patient's pain is eased, yet feels and understands there's more progress to be made. And as I said, very often at that point, it's a lack of clarity again from the therapist and how to bridge the gap. That's the true problem. And then stage 6, the patient's discharge, having achieved the definition of success, moving with thoughtless, fearless movement, no concerns and worries, okay, and they've been exposed to awkward positions. And remember what I said, if they haven't done that, you're robbing that patient of the ability to relax. You're robbing the patient of the ability to actually focus their mind on things that are useful and not useless, okay, instead of worrying about that pain coming back again, okay? So they're the small actions. It's a system, a set of interconnected independent components that work together. So from a head physio system, you should be able to look at those stages. Where did the patient drop off? You should be able to look at the notes quickly and you should be able to instantly identify on what stage your problem is for your therapist, if your head physio systems are set up correctly. And that's the power of this framework. And as Go-To Clinic Mastermind members, you'll be able to see now how we can do this and how we can do this very, very quickly with the right systems in place. Okay. But ultimately, it's about taking all your therapist knowledge, giving them a structure and a system in the clinic to help them think, to help them focus and troubleshoot complex cases. And that's obviously what we do in the mentorship. But ultimately, the customer journey, the patient needs to know, like, and trust us. They need to have good onboarding. They need to start fast. They need to keep progressing, and they need to be a happy patient that's discharged, that's confident in themselves, that's confident in us enough to actually refer other people to us and come back again. And that's where the Go-To Clinic software will give you all of that. We've got all the systems and all the workflows, so that anytime from a patient, from when they first come in contact with us, from your social media, you can capture that patient all the way through the journey to when they come in. Are they making a fast start? We can see clearly with our head physio pipelines that I've got on the screen now, when a patient comes in, have they made a start fast? Have they not rebooked again? And that's where then the head physio can get involved very, very quickly. Is the patient off track, or have they cancelled? Okay. Our world-class results pipeline. Is the patient not on track? Great. We've got 3 patients not on track this week that haven't hit their first 3 milestones in 3 sessions. These are the patients I'm going to be talking about in the in-service training, because these are the patients that are at most risk of dropping off now. So rather than trying to spend all my time and energy getting loads and loads of new patients, I'm going to make sure that I'm optimizing everything that I have within the business first and keep these patients progressing. That to me is working smarter, not harder, and it's part of the head physio systems. Okay, so we have within the mastermind now, we've got the clinical systems, we've got the business systems to be able to track a patient from the initial assessment, in fact, to be honest with you, from even before the patient comes in, and the onboarding stage. We can get the patient bought in to the treatment plan even before the patient comes through the door if you do this smart. Okay, the patient comes in through the door, then that's going to take a lot of pressure off the therapist. The therapist then gets the patient to buy into the treatment plan. The therapist now can make a fast start with the patient. They can prescribe the right exercises to maintain progress to the second session in order for the patient to turn up. We've got the clinical system and the business system to help you do that. The patient hits the first 3 milestones. If the patient is not hitting the first 3 milestones, we've got the clinical and the business systems in order to fix that for you. We've got the head physio systems that will identify that for you quickly, so you can proactively stop these patients from dropping off rather than do what everyone else does and wait till the patient's cancelled, do not rebook, and then trying to get your admin to fight an uphill battle. We hit that milestone. Patients then progress to the stage 5, where when the pain has eased, they know that there's more work to be done. We've got the clinical system to show your therapist exactly where to go next there. We've got the clinical system to give your therapist clarity on exactly where to go next. So we can do the heavy lifting for you with our clinical system. Okay. And your head physio systems will show you where you need to be redirecting your therapist to our clinical system in order to solve those problems quickly. So it saves you a lot of time and energy so that you can work on the business or you can treat the patients that you have. Okay. And in stage 6, they achieve the definition of success. Okay. So if you want some help, we've got the private practice clinical system. We've got the Go-To Clinic mentorship, whether you're a solo clinic owner or whether you're a multi-therapist clinic owner. Okay. So the Go-To Clinic business mentorship, we've got the solo clinic owner one now. This is for clinic owners who are working on their own. The definition of success in that program is you've actually got your clinical system in place, you've put the business systems in place so that you're ready to hire a therapist. The definition of success in the solo clinic owner program is you've hired a therapist. When you hire a therapist, then you move up into the Go-To Clinic Mastermind program, because your problems then switch from a solo clinic owner and growth to now head physio problems usually. And that's where then the head physio systems will be installed to help you manage your therapist so that you don't have to continue to treat all the patients and ultimately gain true freedom. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And in the next episode, we'll bring you back more of a traditional, where I'll be joined with Paddy and sharing my own head physio. In the coming episodes, we're going to show you now how to diagnose, how to dissect, how to hire on board, manage your therapist so that these head physio systems can really be a powerful driver to set you free, but most importantly, to drive the actual profit in the clinic as well, based on the results that you've earned these reviews and referrals. Okay, my name is Dave O'Sullivan. Thank you once again for joining me, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you'd like a free copy of my Head Physio Systems 6-step checklist that I use to personally audit my own therapists to make sure that they can keep patients progressing
even when the pain is eased, so that we can ethically increase our patient numbers, our revenues and referrals, head over to www.thegotophysio.com/checklist and I'll get that sent straight over to you. That's it for this week. I'll see you in next week's show.